I almost missed it. I was 3 hours into a trek through the cloud forests of the Kachkar Mountains in northeastern Anatolia. Boots soaked from the morning mist that rolls in off the Black Sea, visibility near zero. I had stopped to check the trail map when something caught my eye. Just off the path, half hidden under a canopy of moss and ancient oak, a flower. Not a garden flower, not the kind you pass at a village market in Trabzon and forget by lunchtime. This was something else entirely. Deep crimson, almost black at the centre, petals so perfectly formed they looked artificial, like someone had carved them from velvet and placed them there as a riddle. I stood completely still, for almost a full minute. I did not photograph it. I did not reach for my phone. I just looked. That moment changed something, because up until that point, I thought I understood flowers. Pretty things, decoration, background noise in a nature documentary. I was wrong. What I found that day in the Kachkar was a flower that had not been documented in that region in over 40 years. A flower that blooms for exactly 72 hours, then vanishes. 72 hours, once every few years. I happened to be in the right place, on the right day, in the right hour. The odds were almost impossible. And that is exactly the point. The wild holds flowers most of us will never see, not because we are unlucky, but because they exist in places and windows of time that most people never even think to look. Hidden in cloud forests above the Pontic Alps, on limestone cliffs above Anatolian glaciers, in semi-arid highland basins that flood for a single week each decade, flowers that evolved in complete isolation from human eyes. They do not bloom for us, they bloom for survival. And the strategies they use to do it are more extraordinary than anything a botanist could dream up in a laboratory. 10 of them are waiting for you in this video. Not the ones you can buy at a florist in Istanbul's Grand Bazaar, not the ones that grow in managed parks along the Bosphorus. These are the ones found only in the wild. Some are so rare, fewer than 100 living specimens exist on Earth. Some have never been successfully cultivated. Some bloom once every several years, and some, like the one I found in the Kachkar, have been seen by almost no one alive today. Every single one of them will make you rethink what a flower can be. Welcome to the Anatolian peasant farmers, where we unravel the wonders of the natural world, starting in the soil beneath our own feet in Anatolia and reaching outward to every wild place still standing. Here at the Anatolian peasant farmers, we do not do lists for the sake of lists. Every video we put out starts the same way, with a question. Not a comfortable question, not the kind you can search in 30 seconds and feel satisfied. A real one, the kind that stays with you after the screen goes off. Today's question is this: how many flowers exist on Earth that no human being alive has ever seen? The answer is nobody knows. Botanists estimate that somewhere between 10 and 20% of the world's plant species have not been formally described yet. In the Caucasus biodiversity hotspot alone, which stretches from the eastern Black Sea coast through the highlands of eastern Anatolia, researchers continue to identify new plant species that have existed for millennia without a scientific name. The cloud forests of the Pontic Mountains, the volcanic plateaus of central Anatolia around Cappadocia, the karst sinkholes and canyon systems of the Taurus Range in the south. These are places where the flora is so dense, so layered, so ancient, that science is still playing catch-up with what nature built millions of years ago. That is not a small thing. That is not a footnote. That means right now, as you watch this, there are flowers blooming somewhere on this planet that have never been seen by a single pair of human eyes. Flowers with colors we do not have names for. Flowers with pollination strategies so complex they would take a full research paper to explain. Flowers that have evolved in complete isolation for so long they no longer resemble anything else alive. We find that extraordinary, and we think you do too. That is why you are here. Now here is what separates this video from every other flower list you have seen. We did not build this from a database search. We did not pull the top results from a stock image library and write captions. The 10 flowers in this video were selected using one non-negotiable criterion. They exist only in the wild. You cannot buy them, you cannot grow them at home. You cannot find them in a botanical garden on a Sunday afternoon in Ankara or Izmir. If you want to see them, you go to where they live, on their terms, in their habitat, in the narrow window of time they choose to bloom. Otherwise, you do not see them at all. That criterion alone cut hundreds of candidates from our list. We cross-referenced field records from the Turkish Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry's plant database. We went through documentation from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. We reviewed herbarium specimens held at the Faculty of Science at Ankara University and the Natural History Museum's collections in London. We looked at expedition journals from botanists who have spent careers searching in the Anatolian highlands and the eastern Mediterranean coastal ranges, and who still consider a single sighting the highlight of their professional lives. When a botanist who has published 47 peer-reviewed papers tells you a flower left them speechless, you put that flower on the list. Every entry in this video carries at least one of the following: a conservation status, a documented rarity metric, a geographic restriction so extreme that fewer than 1,000 people on Earth have ever stood in proximity to the bloom, or a biological behavior so unusual it has generated active scientific debate. These are not decorative. These are survivors. Some of them have been blooming continuously since before the first human civilization rose in Mesopotamia and fell again. Some of them exist now only because a single scientist or a single seed bank, including the Aegean Agricultural Research Institute in Izmir, which holds one of the most important wild plant genetic collections in the region, stood between them and permanent extinction. Some of them are so rarely seen that the photographs we will show you in this video represent a significant portion of the documented visual record for that species. Let that settle for a moment. The image you are about to see may be one of fewer than 30 photographs ever taken of that flower in the wild. We take that seriously. Because these flowers are not content. They are not aesthetic. They are not background for a time-lapse video. They are the product of millions of years of evolutionary pressure, climate adaptation, and biological ingenuity, and most of them are disappearing faster than we can document them. That is the other reason we built this list. Because knowledge matters. Because the moment a species loses its visibility, the moment it drops out of public conversation, it becomes easier to ignore when the funding decisions get made, when the land gets rezoned, when the grazing permit gets approved in a protected highland pasture above Erzurum. The Anatolian peasant farmers exists because we believe that a community of people who know what is out there, who can name it and describe it and feel something when they hear it, is under threat. That community is part of the conservation infrastructure. You watching this video is not passive, it is participation. If a flower you have never heard of can survive millions of years on its own terms, the least we can do is hit the subscribe button so you are notified every time we release new stories like this. Takes 2 seconds. Let's keep going. Flower 10. The Middle Mist Red, Camellia japonica, Middle Mists Red. Picture walking into a garden in the middle of an Anatolian winter. Everything is grey. Everything is cold. And then, right there in the corner, against a stone wall, a flower so deeply pink it looks like it is generating its own warmth. This is the rarest flowering plant in the Western world. Not rare as in hard to find, rare as in two. 2 confirmed living specimens exist on Earth. One in a botanical garden in New Zealand, one in a walled garden at Chiswick House in London, England. That is the entire global population of this flower in cultivation. The Middle Mist Red is a camellia, a family known for being robust, easily propagated, and widely cultivated. By every biological measure, this flower should be common. It is not. It was brought from China to England in 1804 by plant hunter John Middlemist, and somewhere in the 2 centuries that followed, it vanished entirely from its native range. China no longer has it. The country it came from cannot find a single wild specimen. But here is the twist. It blooms in the dead of winter, January and February, when nothing else flowers, when pollinators are scarce and the ground is frozen. The Middle Mist Red opens anyway. Deep, layered, rose-like petals in a colour that has no proper name. Not red, not pink. Something between the two that stops people mid-stride. Historically, camellias of this type were so prized by the Chinese imperial court that they were given as diplomatic gifts to foreign dignitaries. The irony is complete. The flower that once symbolized imperial power now survives only on the other side of the world, in a walled English garden and a New Zealand greenhouse. It is not listed as endangered because it no longer exists in the wild at all. What remains are 2 cultivated plants, alive because of human intervention. If those 2 specimens die, the Middle Mist Red is gone. Flower 9. The Quadruple, Epiphyllum oxypetalum. Imagine being told that the most beautiful flower you will ever see blooms only at midnight, and that by the time the sun rises, it is already dead. That is not a metaphor. That is the biology of the quadruple. This flower opens after dark. It reaches full bloom between midnight and 2 in the morning. By dawn, the petals have already begun to collapse. The entire flowering event, from first opening to complete wilt, lasts fewer than 6 hours. It happens once per year on any given plant. You cannot plan for it, you cannot schedule it. You can only be there or not. The quadruple is an epiphytic cactus. It grows on trees in the tropical forests of Sri Lanka, southern Mexico, and South America, using its host for structure rather than nutrients. Its blooms stretch up to 30 centimeters across. Pure white. And the fragrance, described consistently by everyone who has experienced it as unlike anything else in the plant world, fills a wide radius in the dark. Here is the twist. The quadrupel has never been successfully cut and sold as a flower. The moment it is separated from the plant, it begins to die faster than any cold chain can compensate for. It cannot be commodified. It cannot be bought. Its value is inseparable from the living plant and the exact moment it chooses to open. In Sri Lanka, the quadrupel is called the flower of heaven. Legend says it blooms to offer itself to the Buddha, and that witnessing the bloom is a blessing that occurs only for those who deserve it. In the highland villages around Kandy, entire communities have traditions of staying awake through the night specifically to witness a quadrupel opening. Not to photograph it, to be present for it. It is not endangered, but it is categorically unreachable. Wild specimens exist in habitats that are shrinking, and a flower that cannot be propagated commercially has no economic argument for its conservation. Its only protection is cultural reverence, and cultural reverence is not a legal instrument. Flower 8. The ghost orchid. Dendrophylax lindenii. Imagine a flower with no leaves, no visible stem, nothing anchoring it to the visible world, just a cluster of white petals hanging in the humid air of a Florida swamp, appearing to float without any connection to the earth beneath it. That is not an illusion. That is the ghost orchid. It has no leaves. It photosynthesizes entirely through its roots, which are grey-green and pressed so flat against the bark of the trees it inhabits that they are nearly invisible. The flower emerges apparently from nowhere. It is there, and then, weeks later, it is gone. Here is the twist. The ghost orchid can only be pollinated by a single species, the giant sphinx moth. A moth with a proboscis long enough to reach the nectar at the base of the flower's long, trailing spur. Remove the moth, and the ghost orchid cannot reproduce. Two species locked in an evolutionary dependency so specific that the disappearance of one would trigger the collapse of the other. It was made famous by Susan Orlean's book The Orchid Thief, later adapted into the film Adaptation. The obsession the book documents is real. People have entered protected swampland illegally for hours just for the chance of a sighting. Fewer than 2,000 ghost orchids are estimated to remain in the wild. Habitat drainage and poaching are the primary threats. It is listed as endangered, and it is still being stolen. Pause. What beauty does not mean. Before we continue, we need to say something that most nature channels will not. Beautiful does not mean important. We reference the word breathtaking in the title of this video, and we mean it, but breathtaking is a human response. The flowers on this list did not evolve to be breathtaking. They evolved to survive, and the strategies they use to do that are frequently not beautiful at all. They are ruthless. They are deceptive. They are, by any reasonable standard, morally indifferent to our admiration. We think that makes them more interesting, not less. The conservation world has a well-documented problem called the charisma bias. Funding, attention, and protective legislation disproportionately go to species that humans find visually compelling. Some of the most ecologically critical plant species in Anatolia are not beautiful by any conventional measure. And some of the most beautiful flowers in the world, including several on this list, are ecologically parasitic. They contribute almost nothing to the systems they inhabit. We are going to keep telling you they are breathtaking anyway, because they are. But hold both things simultaneously. The beauty is real, and it is not the point. Flower 7. The corpse flower, Amorphophallus titanum. Imagine standing in a botanical greenhouse when the temperature in the room suddenly rises. Not the building temperature, the flower's temperature. The bloom in front of you is generating its own heat, and the smell that hits you a moment later is so precisely calibrated to replicate rotting flesh that your brain triggers a reflexive recoil before your conscious mind can override it. This is the largest unbranched inflorescence in the plant world. A single bloom can reach 3 meters tall and weigh over 75 kilograms. It takes between 7 and 10 years of energy storage to produce it. Then it blooms for 48 hours. Then it collapses. The corpse flower actively thermogenates. It raises its internal temperature to approximately human body temperature to project its odor compounds further into the surrounding air. It is mimicking a decomposing animal carcass with biochemical precision. The target audience is not humans. It is carrion beetles and flesh flies who arrive expecting a meal, find nothing, collect pollen in confusion, and leave to repeat the mistake at the next bloom. Here is the twist. The corpse flower is technically not a single flower at all. It is an inflorescence, a structure containing thousands of tiny individual flowers clustered at its base. What looks like one dramatic bloom is a coordinated system. The female flowers open first, receive pollen, then close. Then the male flowers open and release pollen. The sequence is timed to prevent self-fertilization with near-perfect reliability. In Sumatran folklore, the corpse flower is associated with spirits of the dead. In 1889, when the first bloom was documented outside Sumatra at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew in London, the crowds were so large that police management was required. It is listed as vulnerable. Its native Sumatran rainforest is being cleared for palm oil production at a rate that has reduced its wild habitat by over 50% in 3 decades. Flower 6. The parrot's beak, Lotus bertholletii. Picture a clifftop on the Canary Islands. Volcanic rock, sharp Atlantic wind, and growing from a crack in the stone, a plant trailing silver-haired stems over the edge, tipped with flowers so precisely shaped like a parrot's beak that the resemblance is genuinely startling. This flower evolved specifically for a pollinator that no longer exists. The parrot's beak co-evolved with sunbirds native to the Canary Islands. The curve of its flower, the depth of its nectar, the angle of its bloom, every structural detail was shaped by millions of years of interaction with those birds. The sunbirds went extinct. The parrot's beak remained, and it has been functionally unable to reproduce naturally ever since. Here is the twist. It has not given up. Recent field studies show the flower has begun adapting its pollination strategy toward other bird species, particularly the Canary Islands chiffchaff, that were never part of its evolutionary history. It is, in real time, attempting to reroute a biological system that lost its primary partner. Whether it will succeed before habitat loss eliminates its remaining wild populations is a question without a current answer. In the Canary Islands, it is considered a symbol of resilience, which, given the circumstances, is either deeply appropriate or profoundly optimistic, depending on your perspective. It is critically endangered in the wild. A flower in a garden pot is not a wild population. It is a memory. The real question. We have spent considerable time in this video telling you these flowers are irreplaceable. And they are. But here is what we are not saying in the same breath. Humans have already caused the extinction of thousands of plant species. Most of them had no common name. Most were never photographed. Most disappeared before any botanist classified them. The flowers on this list are the ones that survived long enough to be documented, long enough to be beautiful to us, long enough to appear on a list. The real question is not which of these flowers you find most breathtaking. The real question is, what are we willing to change so that the ones we have never seen get the same chance to survive? Tell us what you think in the comments. We read every one. We want to pause for a moment before the final 5 because there is something happening in this video that we have not named out loud yet. Every flower on this list was selected not just for its rarity or its visual impact. It was selected because it teaches something. Each one is a case study in a specific biological strategy. A solution that evolution arrived at under pressure over millions of years that solves a problem humans are still struggling to solve with technology. Drought resistance, nocturnal energy conservation, pollinator manipulation, structural mimicry so precise it defeats the sensory systems of insects with compound eyes and chemical receptors we cannot fully replicate in a laboratory. We are not watching a beauty pageant. We are watching an engineering archive. And the secret technique, the thing the Anatolian peasant farmers builds every video around, is this. The most effective way to make someone care about conservation is not to tell them a species is endangered. It is to first make them understand what that species figured out. Because the moment you grasp what a flower actually does, the mechanism, the strategy, the ingenuity buried in its biology, losing it stops feeling like an abstract statistic and starts feeling like burning a library. That is what the next entries are going to do. Flower 5. The Jade Vine. Strongylodon macrobotris. Imagine pushing through dense tropical forest in the Philippines and looking up to find a cascade of flowers hanging from the canopy above you. Not white, not red, not any colour you associate with flowers. Turquoise. A deep, luminous, impossible turquoise, the colour of shallow Aegean water held in the shape of curved claws, dangling in clusters up to 1 metre long. This is the only flower in the world that produces this colour naturally. The pigment is the result of a specific combination of compounds, malvin, anthocyanin, and a flavonoid glucoside called saponarin, that interact to produce a green-blue tone that has no equivalent anywhere else in the botanical world. The jade vine blooms in clusters of up to 100 individual flowers per inflorescence. Each flower is shaped to position a visiting bat's head at exactly the right angle to collect pollen while drinking nectar. The flower glows faintly under ultraviolet light, the spectrum bats navigate by, making it visible in the dark forest canopy when nothing else is. Here is the twist. Outside of its native habitat in the Philippines, the jade vine cannot be pollinated naturally. No bats, no seed production. Every jade vine outside the Philippines exists because a human being hand-pollinated it with a brush, mimicking the exact motion of a bat's foraging visit. The Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew in London has been doing this for decades. In Philippine mythology, the jade vine is associated with the Diwata, forest spirits said to guard wild places. Cutting a jade vine without permission was historically considered an act that invited misfortune. The ecological logic underneath the belief was sound. It is endangered. The bats that pollinate it are themselves under pressure from habitat loss. Two interdependent species, both declining, both dependent on a forest that is shrinking every year. Flower 4. The chocolate cosmos. Cosmos atrosanguineus. Picture a late summer meadow in central Mexico circa 1867. A botanist reaches down and lifts a flower so dark it is almost black at its center. Deep burgundy velvet petals radiating outward from a core the color of dried blood. He brings it close to his face, and it smells of chocolate. Not floral, not generically sweet, chocolate. Warm, dark, unmistakably chocolate. A vanilla cocoa compound produced by the flower's chemistry that intensifies in heat and fades in cold. The chocolate cosmos is extinct in the wild. Every chocolate cosmos that exists today is a clone, descended from a single specimen collected in the late 19th century and propagated vegetatively ever since. It produces no viable seeds. It has never produced viable seeds in cultivation. There is an unknown failure somewhere in its pollination biology that has prevented natural reproduction for over 150 years. In the language of Victorian botany, where flowers were assigned moral and emotional meanings, the dark cosmos represented love that persists beyond death. Given that every living specimen is a genetic copy of one plant that survived extinction through human intervention alone, that meaning has aged with unusual precision. Its survival now depends entirely on the continued interest of the gardeners and botanical institutions that propagate it. The moment that interest fades, the species ends. Flower 3. The Dracula orchid, Dracula chimera. Imagine a flower that looks like a face. Not vaguely, not metaphorically, a face. Two round eyes formed by the darkened bases of its lateral sepals. A broad, flat lip that reads unmistakably as a mouth. Some species in the Dracula genus produce blooms so precisely simian that the common name used by field botanists, monkey face orchid, requires no explanation the moment you see one. The Dracula chimera does not produce nectar. It does not offer pollen rewards. What it offers is an illusion. Its lip mimics the cap of a specific species of mushroom, in texture, in color, and in smell. It produces a fungal odor compound chemically indistinguishable from the mushroom it is impersonating. The flies it targets for pollination arrive believing they have found a breeding site, attempt to lay eggs, collect pollen, and leave. The orchid has deceived them completely and given them nothing. Here is the twist. The mimicry is so precise it only works on one species of fly. A single species. If that fly is not present, the orchid cannot reproduce. The two organisms are locked in a relationship so specific that neither can exist without the other, and yet the orchid offers the fly nothing. It is pure exploitation dressed as invitation. The Dracula orchid grows exclusively in the cloud forests of Colombia and Ecuador at elevations between 1,500 and 2,200 meters, in conditions of near-permanent mist and low light. As cloud forest floors warm by fractions of a degree, the mist layer rises. The orchid's viable zone shrinks upward. There is a ceiling. Eventually, if the trend continues, there is nowhere left to go. Before the final two. We saved these deliberately. Not because they're the most visually dramatic, though they are. Not because they have the most extreme biology, though that argument could be made. We saved them because together they represent the two ends of the same question that has run underneath this entire video. What does it mean for something to survive? Flower 2, the Middle Mist Red, revisited. We covered this one already. Flower number 10. 2 confirmed specimens in the world. We are bringing it back. Not because we forgot, because of what happened after we finished researching it. We found a field note from a botanist at Chiswick House in London, dated 2019. A routine inspection. She was checking on the specimen, and in the notes, clinical, factual, written for a botanical record, she used a single phrase that we have not been able to stop thinking about since. She wrote, "The plant appears content." A scientist, writing for a scientific record, used the word content, not healthy, not stable, content. We have read hundreds of botanical field notes in the research for this channel. We have never seen that word before, and we think that tells you something about what happens when a human being spends enough time with a flower that has survived everything: war, neglect, extinction in its homeland, 200 years of displacement, and is still, on a cold January morning in a walled London garden, blooming. Sometimes a word chooses itself. Flower 1, the Rafflesia. Rafflesia arnoldii. Imagine kneeling in the undergrowth of a Sumatran rainforest and watching something emerge from the ground that looks like it should not exist. No stem, no leaves, no roots you can see. Just a structure pushing up through the soil that begins as something resembling a dark, mottled cabbage and opens, over the course of days, into a flower 1 meter across. The largest individual flower on Earth. It weighs up to 11 kilograms, and the moment it fully opens, the smell hits you like a wall. Rotting flesh. Decomposing meat. The precise biochemical signature of death produced by a living flower with such accuracy that flies and beetles arrive within minutes, convinced they have found a carcass. The Rafflesia has no stem, no leaves, no roots, no chlorophyll. It photosynthesizes nothing. It is entirely parasitic, living inside the tissue of a host vine for years, invisible, feeding, building energy for a single event. 1 bloom, 1 week. Then it collapses and disappears back into the host as if it was never there. Here is the twist. Pokémon fans already know this flower. Vileplume, the toxic gas Pokémon, is modelled directly on the Rafflesia. Its Japanese name is a phonetic tribute. A generation of children grew up knowing the silhouette of one of the world's most extraordinary organisms without ever knowing it was real. It was hiding in a video game the whole time. The Rafflesia arnoldii is listed as endangered. Its host vine is listed as vulnerable. They cannot exist without each other. They are declining together. And because the Rafflesia produces no above-ground structure except its bloom, there is no way to count how many exist in a given forest. The true population size is unknown. We are losing something we cannot even measure. That is where we end, not with a number, not with a statistic, with the thing that sits underneath every flower in this list and every video. The Anatolian peasant farmers makes. We do not fully know what we have. We do not fully know what we are losing. And the distance between those two unknowns is where every meaningful conversation about conservation actually lives. So here is what we want from you today. One flower from this list, the one that stopped you. The one that made you pause the video or sit back or say something out loud to the room. Leave it in the comments, just the name, or a sentence, or whatever came to you when you heard it. Because that reaction, that involuntary moment of recognition when something wild makes contact with something inside you, is the whole point. It is the reason this channel exists. It is the reason field botanists spend years in the Kachkar Mountains, in the cloud forests above Artvin, in the limestone gorges of the Taurus Range, looking for something most people will never see. They are not doing it for the data. They are doing it because something about these flowers refuses to be ignored. We think you feel that too. That is why you are still here. If this video gave you something, share it with one person who might not have found it otherwise. That is how something that matters stays alive, not through algorithms, through people deciding it is worth passing on. The Anatolian peasant farmers will be back. We are already in the field. In the highlands, in the valleys, in the places where the wild still has things left to show us. Until next time, keep looking. The wild is not finished surprising us.